Good evening, viewers. Today we have with us James again. Today is going to be a very different and something I think it will be, sir, something very which will the viewers may or may not like. That's what sir says. So something very different. Something on nakshatras which has never been told before, never discussed before. Sir has written this in his book, Braha Sutras, which we already shared the link. And I will share the book again with you. This is the book. He has written about nakshatras in this. There is one full chapter. And sir is going to disclose many things which are not correct nowadays, which are being told by the nakshatra. Sir, let's begin our session.
There's a little bit of a misconception here.
Yes. So
it's called the Braha Sutras, and it's 216 sutras.
correct.
The one on nakshatras is a tiny little piece. It's number 162. Okay. So, and the reason that it's number 162 rather than number 20 or 30 or 40 is because this is getting to an issue that is actually controversial, but people don't yet know that it's controversial. So I'll be explaining that. But don't think that the book is about nakshatras. It's
no,
not.
it's a very small piece. And
Right.
sir has just cleared what is true about nakshatras, what is not.
So the thing about the book is that it's unlike anything that I've ever written. And
Correct.
honestly, it's unlike anything almost anybody has written, because very few astrologers have written a book at the end of their career, at the age of 70. There's one person who did, Isabel Hickey. She's a Western astrologer. And when I read that book, I was gobsmacked. I said, oh my God, all I have to do is learn everything in this book. And I soon found that I couldn't learn it all because it was a lifetime of wisdom. So that's what the Braha Sutras is. It's different than anything else, but it's not about philosophy. It's not about scriptures. It's about my experience. So in that book, a lot of what I talk about is this is the way it really works. This is the way they say it works. This particular one doesn't work at all. And then these others work extremely well. It's a very practical book. And that's why the book is on, for Westerners, they go to Amazon. And if you read the reviews, there's 10 reviews. They all say the same thing. Oh my God, this is saving me years of work because he's telling me stuff I couldn't figure out on my own. And it took me 20, 30, 40 years to figure out some of these. And a lot of the sutras are also based upon, I spent over a year doing this, and I would write in the morning and then do my readings in the afternoon. And every time I would do, not every time, but many times when I'm doing a reading, the person would say something and I'd say, no, that's not the way it works. And then I would take that and put it into the book, because I know that if this person thinks that, there's others thinking that. So this is not not the simplest session for me. And I have some notes here because I want to be able to say all the things that I want to say. And this session is for lovers of astrology, but more so for the lovers of astrology that are really serious about the truth. This is not an easy field that we are in. The field of astrology is treacherous, and I mean treacherous. It is not an easy field, as I will begin to explain. But first of all, let me just say something about nakshatras. The nakshatras were written in the Vedas and the Puranas, not astrology texts. Now my wife made me this is a warning symbol. If you're out on the road and there's danger, they put a warning signal, okay? So I'm gonna hold up the warning signal occasionally, and I'm gonna hold up the red flag occasionally. So the fact that nakshatras were written in the religious scriptures, the Vedas and the Puranas, which were 2,000 years before they showed up in an astrological text, they showed up in Brihat Jataka, 2,000 years later. Warning, that's a warning. That tells you something about what nakshatras were used for. They actually are used a little bit in astrology. The dashas are based on the nakshatra that you're born, where the moon is. They are used very, very well for muhurtas, when to start something. And they are used very well for compatibility. The nakshatras fall into three categories: human nakshatras and
Devas.
Devas.
Yes.
Devas, rakshasas, and humans. And so when they do compatibility, the certain ones fit with each other. And they work very, very well for that. The nakshatras are very different from Jyotish. Jyotish is the planets in the houses, the planetary aspects, the yogas. That's what Jyotish is. The nakshatras are archetypes. Archetypes are very different than planets and houses. For example, if I say to you, I think Saturn is in your 7th house, therefore your partner treats you badly, you have bad karma in relationships. Or if I say Venus is in your 5th house, you're going to have a child who's an artist, or your mind is going to be very optimistic. These are statements that I can only make to people that have Saturn in the 7th house. Otherwise, it'll sound ridiculous. Or the Venus in the 5th house. I can only say that to someone who actually has it, or the person's going to say that's ridiculous. This is not the case with nakshatras. You can read almost any, I shouldn't say almost, you can read any nakshatra in these modern day books to anybody, and you read it to them and they say, oh yes, that's me. Because the nakshatra is an archetype. It is a theme. It's connected to a deity. Each nakshatra is connected to a god or a deity. It's a theme. Okay. The planets are very specific. The nakshatras are very general, and they are archetypes. And we all relate to every nakshatra. I do not relate to Saturn in the 7th house. I do not relate to Venus in the 5th house because I don't have those. I relate to Anuradha, I relate to Magha, I relate to Chitra in some way, shape, or form, because those nakshatras go around the horoscope. The nakshatras go around. So the nakshatras are in my 1st house, 2nd house, 3rd house. They're all there. They're all there. So the nakshatras are similar to the empty houses of a chart. One of the thing that makes me laugh so much, but sometimes feel very sad, is when someone says, well, I say, wow, the 9th house is the strongest house in your horoscope. And they say, but there's no planets there. And that shows they're amateurs. Because I'll say, yes, but notice that Venus and Jupiter aspect the 9th house. Notice that the 9th house ruler is exalted in its highest point of exaltation and aspected by a full moon. All of those things, even though the 9th house is empty, it can still be the strongest house of a chart, because it's not about whether there's planets in a house, it's about the entire horoscope. So the houses that are empty can be terrible also. I can say the person's 3rd house is terrible, but there's no planets there. Yes, I know, but Mars, Saturn, and Rahu, 3 malefics, aspect the 3rd house. So the houses can be empty and still have an effect. The nakshatras, in my book, I take 6 nakshatras, 6, where there's no planets in my horoscope, none. And those nakshatras still sound like me. They still say, because they don't say the nature of my spouse. They don't say how many children I will have. They don't say whether I'll be rich or famous. They don't say that. That's not what they say. They are archetypes. They are themes. Now, the idea that Jyotish, the Bible of Jyotish is Parashara for most people. In other words, the book Brihat Parasara Hora Shastra, that's the Bible. It has everything. Warning, red flag, warning, red flag. Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra has nothing on Nakshatras astrological. Warning, red flag, the Bible, nothing, zero. You come to the 6th century, and there's a book called Brihat Jataka. And that's the book that astrologers run to see the nakshatras. Warning, red flag, warning. Brihat Jataka spends 3 pages to describe 27 moon nakshatras. Warning, red flag, within those 27 nakshatras, each nakshatra gets 10 to 15 words. 10 to 15 words. 10, you can count them. Ready? Kritika. This is from the Brihat Jataka. Kritika. Glutton, fond of wives of other men, of bright appearance and of widespread fame. It's about 15 or 17 words. Aridra, insincere, of irascible temper, ungrateful, troublesome, and addicted to wicked deeds. That's it for Aridra. Jeshta, will have few friends, will be very cheerful, virtuous, and of irascible temper. Excuse me, something dropped. I repeat, the one text that has nakshatras gives 10 to 15 words on each nakshatra. Now, what was I going to say? Okay, here we go. Warning, red flag. Warning, red flag. In the one scripture that has nakshatras, all that is given are the nakshatras for the moon. Warning, no nakshatra for the ascendant. Warning, no nakshatra description for the sun. Warning, none for the moon, none for Mars. The warnings are to tell you to think, okay? I have to tell you that, I know I sound really extreme here. I can't help it. But I have to tell you that something that I really came to realize recently is that you cannot become a capable astrologer through the words of teachers. It's impossible. It is impossible. And if you look at the people that have risen to the top of the astrological field, they have done it through their own thinking. They take what the teachers say and they test it and they see if it works. If you think that you can take the words of every teacher and that's the way you're going to become an astrologer, it's not going to work. It has to come from your own practice. Now, astrology is a brutal field, and I'm going to give you some examples of why I say that. When I started studying astrology, I had a teacher who taught astrology, Kabbalah, psychic work. He taught lots of classes. And I took a class in the psychic, okay? And in that class, he said, hold on to a keychain or a ring of the person next to you and see if you can come up with anything. And I was quite brilliant. I took the ring or the thing and I started talking about his girlfriend, and it was accurate. But I decided I don't want to do that. That's not what I want to do, because I will never know if it is accurate or not accurate. When I started studying astrology, one of the things that I was doing Western astrology for about 5 years before I went to India. And I found that the solar returns, which they call Varshapal in India, I found that in my experience, they did not work. They were not accurate. They were not consistent. But this is only if you're willing to be, really, really serious about the truth. It turns out that you can say almost anything to clients, and they will usually agree. Anybody who is listening, who has been an astrologer for 3 years, I guarantee, has had the experience where they do a horoscope, the person walks away happy, the person walks away thrilled, the person walks away satisfied, and they come back 2 days later and they say, I gave you the wrong birth time. It was 6 hours different. Warning, red flag. Warning, red flag. That's the field that we're in. The Ayanamsha. Some people use Lahiri, some use Krishnamurti. They're very close. But some use B.V. Raman, some use Shilpand. The Ayanamsha is the figure that you have to use to calculate the horoscope and the dashas and muktis. When you ask somebody who uses Shilpand, why do you use it? Because that's the one that works. When you ask the person who uses B.V. Raman, why do you use it? Because that's the one that works. What does that tell you? Warning, red flag. That tells you the field that we are in. When I was studying, I'm telling you this because many people out there use nakshatras and they say, but I get great results from them. Warning, red flag. People that use ayanamshas that are wildly different from others, they say they get great results. They may get them psychically. That's certainly possible. But Jyotish is not psychic. If the sages wanted Jyotish to be psychic, they would have said, instead of saying Mars in the 3rd house means this, they would have said, look at the horoscope, close your eyes, and see what comes to you. No, that's not what they said. They gave very specific explanations. When I read, so in the 1970s, I read some of the Dane Rudhyar books. Dane Rudhyar was a humanistic astrologer who wrote more than 40 Western astrology books. And he was, by leaps and bounds, had sold more astrology books than anybody. You could take all the other astrologers combined and he still surpassed them. I had these books in my library when I was studying Western. I had 3 or 4 books that had planets and houses. And I used to go to these books, and one of them was Dane Rudhyar. And every time I would read his book, it would be useless because he never said anything definitively. He would string together a bunch of keywords, but he was, I think, French or something. He wasn't English, and so you have to give him some leeway for not speaking the English language, and not speaking it well. I mean, the books were in English. But there was never a noun and a verb put together so that you could actually make sense of the sentence. And he sold more and I said, what is this? How is this possible? Now, I got into astrology because 2 Western astrologers predicted my divorce. They gave me the details. I was blown away by it. And then I read these books that people loved. They loved them because they could use them to say anything that they wanted. Back to the solar returns, which astrologers swear by and love, and Varshapal. So they didn't work for me. When I got to India, I studied with R. Santanam. Santanam was a scholar who had translated, by that time maybe 3 or 4, but he ultimately translated 9 astrological texts he was from South India. he took the Sanskrit and turned it into English. So he was a brilliant man, and he did this with many, many texts. And one of the first questions I said, what about solar returns? He said, that's called Varshapal. They are useless and baseless. He was a scholar, and he said they are useless and baseless. I said, well, that's what I found. Flash forward another 5 years or 3 or 4 years. And I'm at an astrological conference, and I meet Robert Hand, who is the greatest, in my opinion, the greatest, not just Western, but the greatest astrological scholar alive. He is a great scholar. And I said, what about solar returns? They don't work. He said, try them using the precession, try them not using the precession, try them this way, try them that way. And that's when I knew. Robert Hand grew up with a father who was an astrologer. He grew up with it. If this man, by middle age, could not tell me how they worked, I knew my experience, I knew what Santanam said. So this brings up the issue. Well, why do people say they work so well? Well, why do people use different ayanamshas and say they work so well? This is the field that we are in, and it tells you how our minds work, okay? I'm giving you red flags about the nakshatras so that you can think about them. They don't exist in the astrological scriptures, but today, everybody is just making a bit, they're writing chapters on them. And mind you, these are modern day in the last 25 years. These are not the astrologers from India. Both of my teachers, I mean, from the older days, both of my teachers, Santanam and Padya, they said the same thing. They are gone. They're not in the system. They're from long ago. That's what they said. I have a sutra in this book. It's called Lee Harvey Oswald most likely killed John F. Kennedy alone. There was no conspiracy. Why is this important? That's the sutra. And I spent 2.5 pages explaining this because I was duped from the age of 20 to about 50. I read 40 or 50. It was a great fascination, and I read all these books. And obviously, from these books and from I saw on television witnesses who were there, and they said they saw other killers, blah, 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 blah. And I believed them. It made sense. But then, I forget the year, it's in the book. I think it was around the year 2000. Vincent Bugliosi, who was a prosecutor that had never lost a case, and he wrote a book called Reclaiming History. And he spent 10 years on the book. It's a 1,600-page book about not the conspiracies, he goes through them, but he lays out the evidence. And it turns out that the evidence all goes in the direction of one man, Lee Oswald, shooting Kennedy. All the other stuff are memories and people's memories and what people said and blah, blah, blah. I read 100 pages and I said, oh my God, I was duped. And you can open the book to almost any page. If you read 100 pages, you suddenly realize the evidence all goes in that direction. Then in this book, I found out that there was a mock trial, a fake trial in England, and they brought 15 or 20 witnesses who had spoken on television. I saw the other guy shoot him. I saw other shooters. I saw puffs of smoke. I saw this, I saw that. The two lawyers had never lost a case. One was Jerry Spence, had never lost a case, ever. And he was taking the side that Oswald was framed, that there were many killers. Bugliosi took the side that Oswald did it. It turns out that the jurors agreed with Bugliosi that Oswald did it. And I was shocked. I said, how did he get that response? Because I'd seen the witnesses on television telling their stories. Well, he got the witnesses on the stand. He said, tell your story. I saw this, I saw that, I saw this, I saw that. Then he took the evidence and he said, well, let's see what you said a week after the assassination. They never matched. Now I know people can say, oh, they were doctored, they were taken apart and lied and cheated. But I'm telling you, the evidence goes in that direction. It's the same with the nakshatras. The evidence goes to there was never any explanation of nakshatras for the ascendant, the sun, the moon, Venus. There was never any explanation. The one explanation we got gave a measly 15 words. And if you read any of the Brihat Jataka, you couldn't possibly do a reading like that. So what are astrologers doing? They are reading the religious scriptures. They are taking the themes. This theme, this Bharani is Yama, and this one is this god, and this god represents that. And they're making an entire system of astrology out of it. And they're calling it Jyotish. They're calling it Jyotish. If they want to call it reading the tea leaves, I don't mind. I don't discount that some astrologers could use those things and make up a story, okay? But they're never going to make up a story about how many times a person will be married and divorced, how many children they're going to have. If a person gets divorced, the specifics of why they get, they're not going to, that's Jyotish, okay? So these are, what is really serious about this is that the new generation doesn't know what I've just told you. They don't know this. They never hear it. So how are they supposed to tell? Now, my teacher, Santanam, this is one of his books. It's called Horasara.
Yes.
Okay. This is his, I had him sign the book. That's his inscription. This is Saravali. This is the other Saravali. Let's see. What else did he do? I have it. I have it somewhere. Anyway, he translated like 9 of these books. And what I'm telling you is, when I went to India, I didn't know any Jyotish, but I had read some books and I heard about the mantras, the astrological mantras, and the astrological nakshatras. I had read about the nakshatras. So when I went to India, I was hoping if I found a teacher, that's what I would want to know more than anything. And I was so disappointed. I really wanted to know about these nakshatras. And both of the teachers said, forget about it. They're not astrological. They're religious. They are archetypes, etc. And I was very disappointed. And what I want to tell you is, my first teacher, Santanam, was a scholar who lived and breathed astrology. One of the sutras in my book is, when you're doing a horoscope, see if you can find the difference between who a person is and what they do. Sometimes a person's an artist, and that's what they do for a living. Sometimes they're an artist, but they do engineering for a living. And you can see these things in the horoscope. Sometimes a person is a healer, but that's not how they make their living. But who they are is constantly counseling people and helping. So there's a difference, okay? Santanam, who he was an astrologer. What he did was astrology. He lived and breathed astrology. If you think that I wanted the nakshatras, can you imagine how badly he wanted them? When I was leaving India the first time, I was so grateful. I was nearly in tears saying goodbye to him. And he was not very emotional. He was very, reserved. But I was very emotional. And I said, is there anything that you want that I can bring you from America? And then I held my breath because I thought he's going to say a computer, an expensive watch, something, He said, yes, there's a book I'm looking for. It's called The Element of Astrology by Al-Biruni. I said, that's what you want? He said, that's what I want. I spent 3 or 4 years before I found a Xerox copy of the book, and I mailed it to him. But I'm just telling you, if he could have found the nakshatras, he would have. And this is not just Santanam and Padya. This is all of those astrologers. These nakshatra descriptions. So here's some of my, I want to read this. I went to 3 different books for my Bharani Nakshatra. 3 different authors, modern day authors. And I don't cite who the authors are because they're all my friends. I just disagree with their, but they're my friends. Not only are they my friends, but they've done a tremendous amount of research. But how they're using them, I disagree with. But I should also say, most of those people are not doing nakshatra readings and ignoring the planets and the houses and the yogas. They're not doing that. But other people are. My Bharani moon, book 1, successful in work, capable, truthful, free from diseases. Book 2, brash, harsh in speech, competitive, contact sports, narcissism, neck and face accidents, fevers, and spasms. Book 3, keeps bad company, few good qualities, obstinate, cruel, proud, dutiful, courageous, happy, free from diseases. Aside from the fact that those do not fit James Braha very well, aside from that, listen to what happens when I put them side by side. Rash, harsh in speech, graceful, truthful, happy, courageous, few good qualities, keeps bad company, cruel, free from diseases and grief, fevers, spasms, neck and face, accidents. Now, another thing about this is if you actually, I've written this down somewhere. If you actually look at my life, if I can find it. If you actually look at my life, first of all, the main things that I've done in my life are astrology and the pursuit of moksha. That's basically it. Okay? Astrology and moksha from the age of 20 until 53. The moksha part left after 53 when I was with Sailor Bob. The astrology has gone from 27 all the way to 70. When you look at, you can look not just at the moon nakshatra, but let's say that Varaha Mahira and let's say that Parashara were too stupid to know about nakshatras, and let's say that the new people have discovered it. You can take all of my nakshatras, every one of them. The only ones that you will find to be remotely spiritual or metaphysical are my Rahu and my Saturn. Now, Rahu's in Satabish and the others in Hasta, so those two may be spiritual or metaphysical. Can you imagine somebody reading the horoscope when I was born and saying, oh my God, Saturn and Rahu are in astrological and metaphysical. This guy's going to go for astrology and moksha. That's going to be his life. It's totally absurd. On top of which, we're not supposed to be using nakshatras for anything but the moon, and that's only if you use Brihajataka. And honestly, I don't think Varaha Mahira even really wrote those 15 words for each nakshatra. Red flag, 15 words for each nakshatra. Red flag. But even if you did, they don't have anything to do with astrology and moksha. Now, I'm going to tell you, now, if you want to know the astrology and the moksha in my horoscope, it wouldn't take you more than 6 months to a year of studying to see it. My moon, the all-important moon, is in the 12th house, the house of moksha. Mercury aspects the 12th house. The 12th house ruler Mars is angular right next to Ketu. There's the moksha. If you want to see the astrology, the 10th house ruler Saturn is aspected to the degree by the 8th house ruler Jupiter. There's the astrology. Where can you find it in nakshatras? Nowhere. Red flag, warning, can't find it. Now, here's the essence of my life. I boiled it down. A terrible dysfunctional childhood with a mentally ill mother. That's really fundamental. I spent the age of 10 to 20 as an actor. I went to one of the best acting schools in the United States, but as soon as Mars Dasha began and rules the 12th house, I went for enlightenment. Bad childhood, crazy mother, 10 to 20, the theater. Then came the astrology, then came the moksha, and then came the writing of 7 astrology books, 6 astrology books, and 1 on moksha. Where can these be found in the nakshatras? Nowhere. Warning, can't be found. Warning, can't be found. So I got an email a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and this guy says, oh my God, I'm reading the Braha Sutras. It is outrageous. I'm only on Sutra 52, and I can't believe there's so much practical knowledge in here. Well, it's a lifetime of knowledge. That's up to 52. Then he gets to the Nakshatras, number 162, and suddenly I get an email, what's going on? I've been using Nakshatras, I get such good results, and blah, 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 blah. What's going on is the same issue as why people could use Dane Rudyard, why people could use the memories of the conspiracy rather than using the actual evidence. So I understand that people that are using nakshatras and are heavily invested in them because they've been using them and they like them and the people love them. I understand that the most that we can do here is to put a little wedge in there that makes them begin to think. Could there be a reason there is barely any nakshatra descriptions in the astrological texts in the scriptures? Could there be a reason for that? Did Parashara know everything about all these incredible mathematical techniques, the planets, the houses, the dashas, the bhuktis, but somehow he left out the nakshatras completely? Was there something about all the other texts, Saravali, Gargahora, all these others, where they don't mention the nakshatras as astrology? Is there some reason for that? So we put a little wedge in there, and this will land upon. So first of all, many people that have read the sutras already, they've told me, I've tried to use the nakshatras, and I find them very vague. You can read any one of them to anybody, and they say, "Oh yes, that sounds like me." So a lot of people are saying, "Thank you. I'm tired of looking because they haven't worked for me." Right? Then there's the people where they love them and they're fascinating, and so we put a little wedge in there. But for the people that are serious, and I am guilty of spreading knowledge that took me years to find out were wrong. And I had to backtrack and say, this was wrong. Sorry. One of the most difficult ones was my teacher had taught me that the great year for Mercury was the 32nd year. And I've been talking about the great year of Mercury being the 32nd year. And then when I was getting the revised book, I had spent a year revising that ancient Hindu astrology book. And the person who was doing the bookmaking for me, he's an astrologer. And he said, where does this come from? I said, I don't know. My guy got it from a book, Lal Kitab. And anyway, so he went searching for Lal Kitab and he found 2 different translations. And in both of those translations, all the planets were the same years. Saturn was the 36th year, Mars was the 28th year, Mercury was the 34th. Do you know how painful and difficult it was for me to add into this book? I say, sorry, people, I've been talking about this for decades, and the texts say it's the 34th. So these are difficult things, but it depends on how serious you want to be. It depends upon how rigorous you want to be. And in fact, it depends on how accurate you want to be. It depends on whether you want to be accurate. I mean, we make mistakes, of course. I'm not saying that people are doing this purposefully wrong, but I mean, look at the evidence. look at the nakshatras and see if you can predict. There's a review on Amazon. It came out the other day. It was so massively impressive. I had to post it on Facebook. I said, forgive my shameless ego, but I gotta post this. And the lady said, she said she had she'd come back to me for a reading. During COVID, she was getting all her stuff together, throwing stuff out. She found the tape that I made for her in 1990. And I had told her, you're going to have a child. And I described the sex of the child and the nature of the child. And in the review, she says, when I saw this, I said, geez, this guy did this 3 years before the child was born, and he got it accurate. And she was so impressed, she came back for another reading. Then she got the Braha Sutras, and she posted the review on Amazon. She said, oh my God, she said, I have 100. She said, I have 100 astrology books. This is the best one. Now, she's saying that because of the practicality of it. Please understand, in the introduction of that book, I state unequivocally, you have to do your own thinking, you have to do your own testing. And I say, these are the Braha Sutras. They're not God's sutras. They are my findings. And I say specifically, if you find that your experience works better than something I've written, glory, hallelujah. You have followed what I have said in the text. Follow your experience. Be skeptical and picky. And if it works for you, it works. But if you're going by your experiences versus mine, because of what you've read, because of what because the client doesn't disagree with you, that's not so good. It has to be accurate. So I've always been about accuracy, and I say in the text, when I die, I believe in an afterlife. There may be, there may not, but I believe that when I get there, I might be able to find out what I was right about and what I was wrong about. And I won't be terribly surprised either way. I will be surprised on the nakshatras. I will not be surprised if I find out that, oh, it's like reading tea leaves. My mother used to tell me that she was from Syria, and there were these people, you would drink the tea and then turn the cup over and they would read the tea leaves. They were psychic. I wouldn't be surprised to get to the afterlife and find that people were psychically using nakshatras. But if they're telling me that they're using nakshatras as a form of Jyotish, I could convince a jury of people that did not have already strong opinions. I could convince them. The evidence is that these are religious, and they are in the Puranas, and they are in the Vedas, and they are not in the astrological texts. And the meager little bit that you find in Brihajataka is so general that you can't do anything with it. You would feel cheated. I asked my wife, what would you feel if you read this? You are well liked, and you are charitable. It said that I was a lover of that I would go after other women's wives. This is so, but remember, this is only one of 3 statements that were made, right? I'm a glutton and I go after other people's wives and something else. That's what's said. That is so unlike me. I can hardly tell you, but I don't honestly believe that Varaha Mihira wrote these 10 to 15 words about each nakshatra. I don't even think they're his. So, it is you have to understand, it's a brutal field. And when I met Robert Hand, this was after my book had come out, after I'd been to India. Do you know what we talked about? We talked about, I can't say it the way, the phrase that he used, because it's a little off color, but we said basically, when we're doing astrology, are we really being accurate, or are we just fooling around? He said that. Is it real, or are we just fooling around? And then he told me his father used astrology to predict the stock market. And if his father was wrong, He lost money. That's what Robert Hand grew up with. So he understood that this had to be something that could be real. Otherwise, don't do it. So, the astrologers, not just him, but all of us, we can say anything we want and people will say, oh yes, that's very true. In my first 3 or 4 years practicing Jyotish, not Western, but Jyotish, I was just gobsmacked at what I could predict. I told one woman shortly after coming back from India that she had a problem in her right ear. She said, that's amazing because the doctors say I'm deaf in the left ear. I keep telling them it's the right ear. These things floored me for 3 or 4 years. And then the next 5 years, and really even longer, what floored me was the things in the horoscope that did not work. I became more fascinated by, why does this person have the full moon in the 5th house and have no children? Why? There's always things in astrology that don't work. I always say the 7 in 10 rule. If a technique doesn't work 7 out of 10 times, don't use it. Astrology should work about 70% of the time. But why does every single technique occasionally fail? That's the brutal field that we are in. And so that's what I have to say about Nakshatras. And now I know there's going to be lots of comments, and
I know this video maybe I will have lots of, because I have my Nakshatra teachers, maybe they will watch it. I don't know.
Let me mention something else. In the earlier days, many years ago, I used to say the Nakshatras, both my teachers said they are gone. This is not what that's not Jyotish. I have actually had hosts that would edit out what I said about the Nakshatras. Now, that's really warning, red flag. Warning, red flag. I left a spiritual movement. I was in a spiritual movement for 7 years. Do you know when I left? There were lots of things, there were a lot of great things. Really, without that spiritual movement, I would be a disaster if I hadn't started meditation. But I left when the guru said the students may no longer read texts from other gurus. Warning, red flag. If they're deleting what I'm saying about nakshatras, that's a red flag.
Wonderful, sir. I enjoyed this session. I always enjoy your sessions. Very beautiful. Thank you so much. Students there, please look at the whole session and look at the warning and the red flags that I said and proceed accordingly. So do astrology, which is the real astrology done by ARCHETYPES and all the great astrologers of India. There is lots of stuff we can do. Thank you, sir. Thank you for such a namaste.